Welcome to Canyon Professional Development. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, our second topic. My name is Wendy Norberg. I'm currently a K-6 instructional coach. I've been in education for 23 years in various roles. In this course, participants will identify 3 areas students need to feel safe in to learn. Participants will examine how behaviors are a form of communication. Participants will also identify and define adverse childhood experiences, better known as ACEs. Participants will identify ways to prevent ACEs. The Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, defines ACEs as potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood or ages 0 to 17. There are 3 realms or 3 settings of ACEs: the household, community, or the environment. Think about what traumatic experiences students might experience in their household, in their communities, or their environment. Some of the topics that we might cover moving forward may be ones that you have experienced. They might be ones that others you know have experienced. They might be ones that students you know have experienced. Take this section as slow as you need to, and take timeouts or step away as needed. Always reach out to someone that you can trust, and don't be afraid to ask for help, be it for yourself, someone you care about, or your students. We're going to go over some examples of ACEs. In a household, it might be a divorce, a separation of parents. Maybe one parent has moved out. It may be homelessness, physical or emotional neglect. Sexual and physical abuse would also be considered in their household. Bullying. This might be between siblings. It might be between adults that you see taking place or students see taking place in the household. Domestic violence. Alcoholism and drug abuse. If a parent struggles from mental illness. Emotional abuse. Remember to pause and take time as needed. We will talk about how students can overcome ACEs and what we as educators can do to help support students who are experiencing or have experienced ACEs. There really is hope in admitting that trauma has occurred and healing from that trauma. In the community, some of our students may have experienced violence. There may be substandard schools. Within substandard schools are lack of materials, lack of resources. It might even be lack of teachers that hold certifications. So think about students as they move in. If you are not at a substandard school, your students may have been prior. As educators, it's necessary that we offer them grace and understand how this might be considered a trauma and affect the students. Lack of jobs for family members. Discrimination. Racism. Food scarcity. If you have a student that's worried about food, where their next meal will come from. Substandard wages. This would involve parents who are working 40 or more hours a week. However, they don't have enough to pay the bills. Poverty. Poor house quality and affordability. Historical trauma. The next area where students might might be experiencing ACEs is in the environment. Perhaps a wildfire, record storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons, record heat, especially in areas where students don't have access to air conditioners. They might have even experienced the death of a loved one due to the heat or to the cold. Pandemics. All of our students have been a part of a pandemic at this point. You'll see some environment crises are listed under climate crises and natural disasters. Wildfire shows up twice because it can fit in either category, but it definitely impacts the students. If we know that any of our students have experienced these traumas, it's important for us to keep that in mind when we're working and dealing with them. These are some of the effects of ACEs. Remember to take this as slowly as you need to. Understanding examples of ACEs and the effects of ACEs does not mean that there is not hope. Keep that in mind for yourself and for your students. When a student has experienced ACEs, their tolerance for stress is often lowered. In this, we might see our students fighting, checking out, daydreaming, possibly being defiant. They may struggle with making friends and maintaining relationships. Stress hormones are increased, which affects their body's ability to fight infections or illnesses. Lasting health problems may develop in students. They have increased problems with learning and memory. Brain development can be changed. Often this appears in the change of attention, ability to pay attention, decision-making skills, and responses to stress. A student with more than one ACEs may react inappropriately to situations. ACEs may lead to the increased risk of adolescent pregnancy, alcohol and drug abuse in the student that has experienced the ACEs. Some of the chronic diseases that may develop are asthma, diabetes, heart disease, or liver disease. The student may experience depression. As they start to form relationships as adults, they may be a part of intimate partner violence. A higher incidence of STDs, perhaps because of the choices they're making. May lead to smoking, suicide or suicide attempts, injuries, and possibly even involvement in sex trafficking. Remember, it is always important to understand the effects of ACEs and what it may lead to. However, there is always hope. Keep that in mind for ourselves and our students. 61% of adults surveyed across 25 states report experiencing one type of ACE. 1 in 6 report experiencing 4 or more types of ACEs. This goes back to the saying that you never know what somebody around you is experiencing or what battles they're fighting inside. 1.9 million cases of heart disease and 21 million cases of depression could potentially be avoided if ACEs were prevented. Some children are at greater risk than others depending on their gender and their racial and ethnic background. The economic cost to society totals hundreds of billions of dollars yearly. Again, it's not a negative thing. We just need to keep in mind how greatly ACEs impacts not only our students, but our communities. So let's talk about some tools in your toolbox to deal with students who have experienced ACEs. Here's a few quick and easy strategies for educators to implement. Be a source of safety and support. Allow the students time to move and play. If the student responds well to it, make eye contact with the student. This lets the student know that you care, you're listening, and you're intrigued by what they're saying. Now keep in mind, this doesn't work for all students. In fact, oftentimes if a boy has become extremely upset, it's been shown that they respond better if you walk side by side with them, especially when they're angry. Brain research and development proves this time and time again. Say you're sorry. If we react strongly to a student after they've reacted strongly, it's okay to admit that we didn't respond appropriately. If appropriate, give a 20-second hug. Slow down and stop. As educators, we're often in a hurry to get through all that we're being asked to do. Sometimes all of our kids, not just the ones that have experienced ACEs, need us just to slow down and stop. Take a breath. Look for the good in your students that have experienced ACEs. Be present with that student. Show that student what it looks like to appropriately express being mad, sad, or even hard and hurt feelings. Keep learning and being open. I hope that you'll realize that while these strategies work for students, they also work for others we are working with, and they might be just what we need. This begs to ask, why include SEL and MTSS? In our schools, we implement the multi-tiered system of support. Thinking about ACEs and thinking about the interventions that we use with our students, we need to make sure that we are considering the whole child when determining academic or behavior tier placement. ACEs should be considered when discussing presented concerns. Oftentimes, what might look like ADHD might be a result of trauma. Resilient communities, they work together in a continuous evolving cycle to educate themselves and others about ACEs, to engage. This involves having community conversations. How can we be a support for students who may be struggling? How can we be a support for families that may be struggling? Years ago, when families lived nearby, there were often family members that could stop in and to support families if they were going through traumatic experiences. This isn't always the case as our society has become more mobile and we have the ability to move much easier. It's important that we engage others and that we offer support. Activate. It's important to activate community resources whenever possible. This involves advocating for students who might need an advocate. And we celebrate. This goes back to the hope. We celebrate our students that are successful. We celebrate our families that are successful. If we have parents that are struggling, instead of casting judgment, we can educate them, engage them, activate community resources, and celebrate their successes. ACEs can be prevented when we strengthen economic supports to families. This doesn't just involve monetary. This is family-friendly work policies. If a student becomes ill, their parents may or may not be able to leave work to come take care of them. How can we fill in that void? Understand and address factors that put people at risk for and protect them from violence when possible. Ensure a strong start for children. This goes back to building healthy and modeling healthy relationships. We can teach social emotional learning skills. We can connect youth to caring adults and activities. If a student in your class is not connecting with you, but they're connecting with, say, for example, the PE teacher, see if you can arrange some time for that student to spend time with the PE teacher. Intervene when possible to lessen immediate and long-term harms, especially in regard to health. Ultimately, we can create and sustain safe, stable, nurturing relationships with the children we're entrusted with, and also be an advocate for their families. When awareness of ACEs is made possible, we can change how people think about the causes of ACEs. Less judgment and more support. We can empower all to understand how they can help prevent ACEs. The focus can be shifted from individual responsibility to community responsibility, especially supporting the youth who are victims of some of these traumatic experiences and most definitely not the cause of it. Research shows that if a youth has a strong, healthy relationship with one adult in their life, it does not have to be a parent or someone living in the home. They often can overcome the ACEs that they are experiencing. We can reduce the stigma around seeking parent help and resources. It's okay for a parent to walk in and say they don't know what they're doing. We might not know the answers, but we can certainly help them. We can help to reduce the stigma surrounding seeking help for mental health issues. We can promote and celebrate safe, stable, nurturing relationships. We can work to improve the school culture and climate. As educators, it is imperative that we listen to our students, paying as much attention to their actions as their words. This is even more important for our students that have experienced one or more type of ACEs. Their behaviors tell us so much. If you have a student that's acting out, stop and think about what the antecedent may be or what might be causing those behaviors. Peter Gabriel said, "As many an architect will tell you, human behavior changes according to the environment." We can't change the environment that our students have at home, but we definitely can change the environment that they have in school. Leaders can promote a culture of acceptance. They can help to create and model a safe and stable school community. Educators can share with each other strategies that have worked. Keeping in mind, we are responsible for modeling, teaching, and reinforcing expectations, not just for our students, but for all students. As a community, it's important to spend time discussing how and why an understanding of ACEs is important. Allow time for discussion. Oftentimes, as educators, we take students' reactions personally, and we need to realize that their reactions are definitely not usually just about us. And as adults, we can be helpful by finding ways to stay regulated. This might be stepping away from a situation. This might be calling another trusted adult in the building to step in. This might mean making sure we're getting enough sleep at night, that we're eating well, and we're exercising. Making sure that we show up every day in the best shape that we can, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Additional course handouts can be found. And we hope that you'll subscribe for free PD. In addition to this, we hope that you'll reach out for resources as needed for yourself or for students. For customized professional development, please contact us here. Thank you for joining us today and being part of a discussion about ACEs.